Dr. Jonathan Tripp joining us in the studio this morning from Tripp Family Medicine. All tanned and I think still wrinkled from swimming the other day.
Well, we tried. That's an interesting story right there. We didn't even talk about. This is our medicine's fifth year anniversary party that we invited patients, and we had close to 300 people at the city pool. But the city pool pump broke the night before. We found out the morning of. So for about 4 hours, we were aware that we were scrambling, and they might fix it. They might not be able to. And the answer at the end was they sure couldn't. And so we were moved over to the park area that is just north of the pool. And I got to give credit to my older son who saved the day by saying, "Are we going to have access to a hose?" And we didn't know if we'd have that. And the final, we were told no. And then later we got access to a hose. And he says, "Okay, let's bring a hose, and we're going to bring the biggest tarp we have and a little bit of soap, dish soap, and we made a huge slippery slide down the hill, which saved the day for the kids that came prepared because they all wanted to be. They had their towels and their swimsuits and everything else, and how disappointing to say, "Well, welcome to our picnic, but there's no pool anymore." And
And it was such a cool day, too.
oh yeah, yeah, probably 99. It was about that, so it was warm. But boy, did we have a lot of fun. We had good food, ice cream at the end, and took a picture with a gang of people that were there to help celebrate with us, and even the doctor was caught on the slip and slide with 5 and 10-year-olds. It was a lot of fun.
We're coming up on 8:36, and just a quick note: Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine until 9 o'clock this morning. We're at 72. Dr. Tripp and of course Bill Colley answering telephones. The telephone number, if you've got a question or comment for the doctor this morning, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Um, you're talking actually this. We were just on this topic of outdoor activity, but you're talking about outdoor activity in general today because, let's face it, there are some hazards out there.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of fun to be had, and we live in a state that offers us a lot of outdoor possibilities. And as weekend warriors, we tend to go out and overdo. And so I wanted to focus a little bit on hiking and backpacking and what I call first aid or even wilderness medicine, because that's what's going on in my life right now. I have teenage boys that are going with scouts on what
Mhm.
they call their high adventure, which is sometimes a 50 miler in a few days, and this one's going to be about 20 plus in 3 days. And the old man's going along with them. So I've been very focused on how do we prepare for this? How do we dress for it? How are we in what physical condition we're in? But also me being the, shall we say, the physician accompanying the group, how do I prepare for this? Do I just take Band-Aids with me or how do I do that? So this isn't the full um, medical education on wilderness medicine because that is a huge subject and it's a lot of fun. But
I
this,
feel shortchanged, by the way, because when I was in scouting, there was never a doctor along on any of our excursions.
well, that's that was true for me as well. This time, it just puts a little more pressure on me, and who's most likely to get injured? My own kids, because I know who they are.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. We've all been there. We have to worry. One point we've got to make is just about poisonous plants and the like, because you get out there and you're in the overgrowth. You don't know what's around, and sometimes you can't even see what you're trudging through.
Yeah, that is true. For the most part, the things that will cause you trouble, we think of like poison ivy, poison oak, things like that, or stinging nettle. So it would be wise just to take a minute and, we used to pull out the old encyclopedia and try to
Mm.
look these things up, but, pull out your internet and look up images of poison ivy. Poison oak, especially when I lived in Oregon, was the predominant cause of, blisters and itching for 2 weeks at a time. Just miserable stuff. Um, you know, Not too many people I know of die of that, but they sure think they are. And so that's one way to make a good trip terrible at the end. Because once you get that, you're miserable for a long time. So just looking at those images and paying attention to what's around, sometimes you'll find whole fields of it. So, I grew up in Philadelphia area, and we had a state park that is about 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. we held this big fathers and sons overnight camp out, and we went out to set up our tent and realized that among the grass, every plant that wasn't grass was poison ivy, and nobody else seemed to figure that out. And my dad was acutely aware of poison ivy. He seemed to get it every year. So we backed off on where we were putting that tent and, made others aware. But there was a few cases of poison ivy the next weekend.
I had a
Uh,
friend who grew up in the Philadelphia area, and he told me a story about going one Memorial Day weekend to the Indy 500 with some friends, and they all piled into a car to drive west along Route 80 when it was still relatively new. And as you get out of Philly and you head west towards State College, that region, the hills start to climb.
yeah.
So he suddenly realized nature was calling. So they pulled over and he ran up the
Oh,
hillside in the dark
this is going bad fast, I can tell.
and he grabbed some leaves when he to some, and it turned out to be poison ivy. But he had a wonderful weekend at the
But
Indy 500.
no pun intended.
But no pun
Okay,
intended.
all right.
We've got more with Dr. Jonathan Tripp on the way in just a couple of minutes.
Be careful what you wipe with.
it's
This 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 whole show is going down fast. Okay.
it's 8:40. We're at 73. Joining us in the studio this morning is Dr. Jonathan Tripp from Tripp Family Medicine, located here in Twin Falls. Bill Colley with you as well. I want to point out you can reach the doctor this morning at 736-0300. And the doctor's office is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. That's on the northern side of the city. And other contact information for the office.
Yeah,
You've got a
let's
number of ways people can do this.
you betcha. Telephone number 208 208-933-4400. Website is trippvalleymedicine.com, and on Facebook you can reach us at Tripp Valley Medicine, and you may find out some of the fun things we've been doing as an office. So we're growing, expanding. We're moving our administrative people over to a nearby condo, if you will, just a office area, and that's in preparation for expansion for another practitioner. We're getting a female practitioner back soon. I can't tell you when because it hasn't been official, but that's been awaited since March when we lost one that moved to Arizona. So that's happening. We have immunizations. Probably within 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be up and running with
Mm-hmm.
that before school starts back. That's a new phase for us as an office to have that available. We've always done well child checks, but now we got the immunizations going. So a lot of fun things happening. And in fact, speaking of callers, about a month ago, we had a caller that asked about spider veins, and there was a gentleman talking about spider veins on the face. It's common to see the spider veins along the edges of the nose, but he had them there. He had them on the bridge of his nose. He had them across the cheeks, and traveled from a fair distance to come see us because he'd heard this on the radio and actually called in. He where he lives, he went for a consultation where they do use some technology called IPL, and said he was just unimpressed. He says, maybe that's the right way to go. And with my cosmetic background, I told him that would be the perfect scenario for the final cleanup of what I can't get with the technique that I use called a hyfricator. But it was a lot of fun. He says this was a totally different experience. He felt comfortable. He felt like I knew what I was doing, and that is part of that cosmetic background. But so for those of you that have spider veins on the face, on the legs, whatever else, it was a lot of fun to just do a little bit of zapping, which doesn't take anesthesia, um, and it cleans up so fast that within about 3 days nobody even knows that you've done it. But all of a sudden, a major portion of the redness to the face is gone. So just wanted to bring that up because it was so much fun yesterday.
We want to point out too as well that a lot of folks like that hear the show. You're more than willing to see them, and especially when it comes to that specialty of skincare.
You bet.
And we wanted to mention, of course, we're also talking about being outdoors and common injuries, treatments, and the like. And one thing you're talking a little bit about the fact that you go out with a scout troop. Sometimes you go out straight up the side of a mountain.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, we're going to be doing that.
there's going to be some physiological changes for most people when you do that.
Yeah, if you're not doing any kind of walking, hiking, something that uses your legs, your core very well, I wouldn't say go and try to hike a 10,000 foot peak, on a weekend. Start smaller, do something else. I don't have a lot of hills around my house, but I'll tell you what, I found out which ones. I know exactly on the road where those hills are now. So, but that's an effort to get in better shape. That's part of why they're going to have a doctor with them on this trip instead of years past where I probably wouldn't have made it with them. Um, so, preliminary or prevention is really, getting ready, getting yourself ready is important. Now, that's physically, but like common injuries like a sprained ankle or a cut or the poison ivy, all that kind of stuff, the better answer is prevention. So whether it's you've done exercise to strengthen your ankles, whether you're wearing kind of mid or high top hiking gear like boots and whatnot, these are ways to avoid that. And if you're going to wear shorts, be prepared not to walk through the brush. And if you're going to walk through brush, it's better to have pants on and have long socks so that those oils that get from the plants that could give you poison ivy, poison oak won't be as easily penetrated to your skin. So prevention is a big deal. And so let me start with the ending of my outline for today, and that is when you're going hiking, whether it's for a half day or for a week, the key things you need to do are staying dry, whether that's from too much sweat, so that you have material that will wick away the sweat and keep you dry. Avoiding friction, and so again, materials that won't cause you rubbing the feet, the groin, the shoulders. So protecting against the new things like the backpack, and then probably two key things: staying hydrated and pre-hydrating, so that you don't wait until you're thirsty to start drinking. So hydration and avoiding, sunstroke or heat stroke by cover up. So wide brim hats, long sleeves of light material shirts would be a great move. But once you get to the point where you have sunstroke or heat stroke, now you're in trouble, and you almost have to have somebody carry you out, which is giving them heat stroke.
I made an observation the other day. Well, the last couple of weekends. One day I went south into Nevada. This past Saturday I went up to Arco for a parade, and I'm driving by some of these mountain ranges, and there's still a lot of snow up there. So if you're out hiking, you've also got to be prepared because you're dealing with, in some cases, some drastic changes in climate as you reach that elevation or go
Yeah.
higher and into the elevation.
Well, that's interesting because we talk about altitude sickness and other illnesses related to altitude, and we live in an area that has a lot of high altitude. Our elevation here in Twin Falls is about 2,600 feet, and so that's high compared to sea level. But we go up by Stanley and areas like that, and now your base of those mountain
Hmm.
climbs starts at about 7,000 feet, and you're going up to 10,000. And from areas that are considered or altitudes that are considered risks for problems with altitude start at about 6,000 feet, and especially after 8,000 feet. So a lot of us going up for a weekend hike might be more than you thought it would be as far as slows you down. Your oxygen level is lower at the higher altitudes, so it takes a lot more huffing and puffing to get the same amount of oxygen. So just be prepared. You're not going to sprint, even if you can sprint at home. You're going to have to go a little more moderated, maybe even slow, and just enjoy it. Enjoy the hike, enjoy the scenery. Unlike the 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds that I'll be with, it's not about who can get to the top first, at least not for most of us.
And you think about this. They just the story broke this week about the couple that went missing in Switzerland 75 years ago, and as a glacier retreated, they were just found.
Wow.
And again, they went up to check on some cattle on a hillside, mountainside, and apparently, got caught either in a flash snowstorm or fell into some deep snow, and so there are hazards like that out
Sure.
there too, as well.
Yeah, avalanche isn't so much a problem, although it could be, I guess. But at this point in the year, it's not such a big deal. Just the fact that you're on sunny side and then you cross over a ridge and then you're on literally kind of a glacier area, a snow area, and that's not only cold and can get you wet, but it can be an extreme hazard for sliding right down the other side of that mountain.
Cuts are also going to be a problem because you don't necessarily have ways to always keep something clean if you get a deep gash while you're out there.
Yeah, simple washing If you have soap, great, but water alone does most of what you need to clean out a wound. So things to take with you for lacerations. Not everybody can suture stuff together. That's the benefit of me coming along on your hike this time. But in general, if you have some tape or um, even an ace wrap, or there's a type of material, the brand name is called Coban, but it's a stretchy tape-like material that just sticks to itself. Uh, Something like that will take care of most wounds, even wounds that bleed pretty profusely, acting not as a tourniquet but a compression bandage. And so if you can wash it out with, your drinking water and wrap it up really for a day or two, you're in good shape to get back down the mountain.
We have a caller with us. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air on Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine at 851.
I had a friend up in Northern California, and he went near a bonfire where they were burning poison oak, and he breathed in some of the fumes, and he had a very, very bad experience.
Yeah, that's actually what's called a chemical pneumonitis. It's inflammation of the lung tissue itself because that what I talked about, an oil from the plant getting onto your skin now gets put into the smoke and you inhale it and essentially spread it throughout your lungs and it causes swelling and inflammation, can push you right into true pneumonia and even death. So, yeah, burning poison oak, poison ivy is not to be taken lightly. So make sure you're not downwind from that smoke. So, yeah, that's a bad combo.
And the other thing that we might want to mention as well, I was up in Montana a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't go out. Well, I did go up on one mountainside and checked out the view at one point. But I recall reading a couple of years ago about a fellow who actually was bitten by a rattler in the hills over there, and they had to airlift him out and get him to an ER as quickly as possible. But we've also had recent bear attacks throughout the region. Uh, One just in Ketchum last week, almost an attack. So you got to also be very careful of those surroundings too, because there's critters out there that can be very dangerous.
Yeah, the bear attacks are real. We have them, and where we like to hike, they are there. So there are some kind of like spray can bear repellents that might give you an option. I guess the best thing is to be aware and to be looking and not to have your food out overnight, at least not on the ground where it can be easily smelled or obtained. Because bears, they can break through most of the containers you can bring with you. So it's, if your food has to be nearby, if you can put it higher in a tree, you got a much better chance of A, keeping the food, and B, keeping away from bears visiting your camp. So yeah, it's more just vigilance. In our circumstances, we won't be carrying firearms. That is another possibility. But it's more of look for them, and if you see them coming, it's your turn to go away, not their turn.
Snake bite, though, a lot of times you don't see the animal coming, obviously.
Correct. And if it's a true rattlesnake, that's an emergency. That's time to find a way to get somebody airlifted out of there. The old traditional treatment of, cutting two X's where the fang marks are and sucking out the blood, what we found is they've actually caused more damage to the person by trying to do that, more tissue damage than any real benefit of trying to get the venom out. You can use a tourniquet as long as it's not there for more than about 4 hours. You can wrap a bandana and use a stick to tighten that down pretty good, where you're essentially stopping or slowing the blood return from that limb. That is an option, but not one that should be done for any more than for about 4 hours.
And of course, if you're in some of these spots and someone is bitten, you don't necessarily have cell service in some of these regions. It's a little difficult to get an emergency, anybody out there to actually give you a hand.
Yes, no, it is. It's very tough. You don't have cell service, so you got to rely on other people and their feet to go to where they can get cell service, and then make that phone call and be able to give good directions as to where the victim is.
Speaking of calls, we have another caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air at 8:55. Oh, I think we lost our
Well,
caller.
let me tell you about the thing that's probably the most common for those that don't normally go to higher levels. Like if you travel from here to catch them on a regular basis, you're probably pretty prepared for going to higher levels. But I had the experience of traveling from the Detroit area, where the majority of my training was, for my last 2 years, to Wyoming. And the day I arrived was the beginning of a quote retreat by the residency, and they took us up to 10,000 feet in the Bighorn Mountains. And so I essentially went in the same week from sea level to 10,000 feet. And after about the second day, I started to feel kind of nauseous and lightheaded and a little bit of a headache. Just didn't feel right. And it wasn't that, I was really truly sick or had a fever or anything else. But that second night, one of the senior residents recognized that I had altitude sickness. And altitude sickness by itself is, annoying like it was for me. But the only real answer for it is you go down the mountain. You get down to the lower elevation, you get more oxygen in you. If you had enough strength to carry an oxygen tank with you, I guess you could avoid that. But pretty much it's you go back down the mountain and then things get better because you have more oxygen. But it's a sign of things that are getting worse, and it's usually the person that's gone from a lower elevation like sea level to a very high elevation, and they can get into full it's called pulmonary edema, which is fluid on the lungs. It's not pneumonia,
Is
but
that
it
like the
acts like it.
bends that the divers get as well?
That's a different process. That's nitrogen coming out of your bloodstream and causing long-term permanent troubles within your joints and muscles. But this is kind of the reverse. You just don't have enough oxygen, and so your heart can't keep up, and you actually get fluid building up in your lungs, or you can get swelling or fluid in the brain. And so, altitude sickness, if you went from 0 to 15,000 feet, tried to climb the Himalayas without base camp along the way, you would actually probably die of you would think was pneumonia, but or your brain swelling. You'd lose consciousness and fade away. So I don't think that's going to happen to too many people going from Twin Falls up to Stanley.
No, no, and most of them already have some experience with all of that.
Right.
We want to thank Dr. Jonathan Tripp for dropping in this morning. Once again, what's the contact information?
Oh, our phone number 208 933 4400 933 4400. Whether you want to do spider veins or talk about your next planned hike, we'd invite you as new patients. And we'll take your grandkids if you're the grandpa or grandma. So at trippvalleymedicine.com, you can reach us on the web, and Tripp Valley Medicine on Facebook. And remember, life is too short not to feel good.
We've got a break. Steve Berman joining us from a publication called The Resurgent in the next half hour of the program. Hope you can stick around.